Hello and welcome into the Hecklers Podcast. My name is Gordon Coletto and I am your host. Joining me once again is my co-host Billy. Billy, it's been a while. How are you?
Doing great, excited for Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, a Memorial Day weekend here in Charlotte, full of lots of activities with, of course, the NASCAR races in town. I may make my way over to the Speedway. We will see. It has been quite a few weeks, though. I think the last time we were together was probably about 3 weeks ago on the podcast. I did a couple solo episodes, and then last week I was on my deathbed, so we were not able to pod. But luckily, I have made a full recovery, so we have plenty to talk about. So, there have been several headlines around the NFL, perhaps none bigger than Harrison Buckner's recent commencement speech. I don't want to get into the substance of the speech or individual reactions, but instead I really want to talk about how it continues a trend of off-season distractions for the Chiefs and how that may impact the product on the field and ultimately the Chiefs' pursuit of a third straight championship. So, Billy, I'll kick it off with you. What do you make of the Chiefs' offseason thus far and sort of the bounty of distractions that they have had?
The Harrison Buckner one, um, don't agree with what he said. People can do whatever they want, but getting away from that and going back to the Chiefs, I don't think his is as detrimental to the Chiefs because he's not going to get suspended for what he said. People just aren't going to like him. Um, Rashid Rice, what are you doing? You're in a prime position. You have the best quarterback in the league. You're going to be the number one wide receiver. I mean, I know Travis Kelce's there, but he's not a receiver. He's a tight end. So you're at least the number two option on offense. What are you doing? Why are you being so stupid? Because you're going to set yourself up, if you play well in this rookie contract, in the best situation in the league to make a bunch of money. And he's trying to just throw that away. I don't think look, it's hard to go back to back, which they just did. First time since the Patriots did. And what was it, 2001, 2002? Or was it 03, 04?
I want to say 0102.
Either way, it's been 20 plus years since someone repeated. It's very difficult. A three-peat's going to be that much harder. I don't think they have it. I think, defense isn't something that typically holds year in and year out. They may still be good, but they might not be as good as they were last year. And then you have, your number one wide receiver, your kicker, just having all of these distractions. That's just taken away from your team. That doesn't even factor in, and the Swifties are probably going to kill me for saying this, Taylor Swift. I mean, that is a distraction. So, it's going to be interesting. I think all of this ends up hurting them as a team.
So, here's what I will say, and you brought up the Patriots, and I actually did look. It was 03 and 04, so I apologize for my bad Patriots fandom, although I will give myself a break because I was not even 10 years old yet. So,
Get it together.
remembering, I
Get
know,
it together, Gordon.
I know, but remembering that far back can be difficult. So, but you mentioned the Patriots, and one thing that I think of when it comes to dynasties and it comes to teams like the Chiefs, who I think, if not already are a dynasty, are on the verge of becoming one. The key is, you have to have the ability to weather the storm. And I think that the Chiefs, in a lot of ways, have demonstrated that ability, whether it was the departure of Tyreek Hill, all of the circus that came with Taylor Swift in the building last year, and now everything else happening in the offseason. I think teams, and in some cases, specifically players, reach a point where, to quote the great Thanos, right, they become inevitable. And I think the Chiefs are almost there. I trust Andy Reid as a leader, as as the head of a locker room alongside Patrick Mahomes to get those boys ready to play and to be all business. And that's actually one of those things that I've been surprised by with Patrick Mahomes as a self-proclaimed Mahomes hater and somebody who's slowly coming around to him is, he is somebody who likes to have a lot of fun, but who you can just tell from the moment that helmet comes on and he's on the field, it's all business. And I think about the Patriots and how throughout the dynasty, right, there were a number of scandals, right? Whether it, you can't count the number of cheating scandals on one hand, unfortunately. But, all these things, right? Brady getting suspended in the offseason and Deflategate and all these things, right? And everyone says to themselves, oh, is this the end? And then the reality is they show up at OTAs and it's back to business as usual. So, I do feel like the Chiefs have enough maturity and enough strong leadership in the room to weather the storm. And I think if you look at not just the Patriots, but a team like the Steelers, right? Think about the personalities they've had come through that building. Certain organizations just know how to block out the noise when it comes time to play, and I think the Chiefs are capable of doing that. So. I think, that's as much time as we probably need to spend on the situation, given the fact that all of this stuff has been beaten into the ground. But I think we're both kind of in agreement that you know all these distractions certainly don't help, but that they're not going to be the thing that kills the Chiefs this season. Okay, so as players start to report to their teams, several players are holding out, demanding new contracts, demanding trades. Do any of these players actually matter to the overall success of their team? And what do you see as the likelihood that the issues will resolve themselves before the season begins?
I think the issues usually resolve themselves. Like I think Dak, for instance, like more than likely it does. He's in kind of a gray area. I think T. Higgins is one of the more interesting ones because I mean that's a pretty cheap organization. So are they willing to pay T. Higgins what it's going to cost to keep him? Jamar Chase is going to be in the top five for wide receiver contracts. Realistically, what happens with that is Justin Jefferson gets one, and then Jamar Chase becomes the top paid wide receiver. Although I would say he shouldn't have that contract because he hasn't had enough body of work to say he's the best wide receiver in the league. But I think the T. Higgins one is interesting because I don't think they sign him, or if they do, because you have the quarterback in place, you have another wide receiver in place. Do you just go all offense? Because you're gonna have to make cuts somewhere. And they have Trey Hendrickson, who held out for like a day, and they said we don't care if you hold out, just came back. They have to decide: are they going to pay people on defense, or are they just going to go all offense? And so, I mean, I think that's probably the one that I'm watching the most. And it's not just because I want him to come to the Panthers, but I just, it's the most interesting one. And I think he could hold out successfully and still get paid in the off season. That's why I think it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so this is, I mean, when you talk about a guy like T. Higgins, it's very reminiscent of, we just talked about the Steelers, right, and managing personalities, right? It's very reminiscent of Le'Veon Bell, right, where it's like, this guy could probably afford to, now taking out what it would do to his ability to play, this guy can probably afford to sit out a season and bank on the fact that some team because they're always out there. Some team is going to be desperate for receiving help and is going to be willing to pay a premium for that. And especially as guys like Justin Jefferson sign deals, Jamar Chase, Brandon Ayuk, right? As that number slowly starts to climb, you're sitting in a better and better position if you're T. Higgins to go ahead and capitalize on this second contract. Because, I mean, ultimately, for players, that's what it comes down to, right? Your best value is going to be that second contract. So that's where you have to make your money because the third contract is not going to be guaranteed. You will probably not reach it if you are not able to stay healthy or your production declines. So you have to make your money while you can. And for T. Higgins, that window is open and it may mean sitting out. It may mean not being willing to play through smaller nagging injuries if he does see the field this season. So a lot of question marks there for the Bengals and what that team's going to look like. Same for the 49ers and Brandon Ayuk. And then you mentioned Dak Prescott, two quarterbacks waiting to get paid who are likely not going to get paid, Tua Tagovailoa and Dak Prescott. I don't blame the Cowboys and Dolphins for saying, look, these guys are not proven winners. We are not going to pay them top of the market value until they demonstrate that they can compete with the guys at the top of the market. So I have no problem with ownership saying, look, we're not going to pay a mid quarterback high end money because that's what the market demands. If somebody else wants to go and make Dak Prescott or Tua Tagovailoa their starting quarterback for $50+ million a year, a la Falcons Kirk Cousins, then by all means go ahead. But what does it get you, right? These guys are not proven winners on the biggest stage of them all, which would be the playoffs. So to me, I have no problem with teams in those situations being frugal. I do think that the Bengals should probably think long and hard about whether or not they're willing to let T. Higgins out of the building, and what that'll mean for their new long-haired quarterback, Joe Burrow, with the beautiful long curls. Not sure who told him that was a great idea.
Well, I think too with T. Higgins, I mean, it bodes well for him that Calvin Ridley, while he was
Yep.
suspended, was out for a year,
Yep.
didn't come back and play as well as he did in Atlanta, still had a fine season, and got paid.
And the
So T.
Titans still
Higgins is
paid
going to
out
get
the
his money.
ass. Yep.
Right. And yeah, you took a team that doesn't traditionally do those kinds of things, and they paid him almost $100 million. And just because you mentioned Tua and Dak, I think Dak is a harder one to kind of figure out what they do than Tua. I think, especially because, I mean, Dak doesn't win in the playoffs. We all know that. But in the regular season, I mean, this past year, he was arguably the best quarterback in the league. So I think that one is a little tougher of a situation for them. But I mean, Tua has possibly the best wide receiver core in the league, and they just carry him. So
Yeah, I mean, two is easily not worth the contract, right? The Dolphins would be foolish to pay him.
maybe
They
you franchise tag him,
could see that.
maybe.
And
But
here's
yeah,
the thing.
I wouldn't pay him. Not at the 50 million that he's going to want. If you could get him what 35 to 40, which is still an astronomical number, that makes more sense though.
I think teams are looking at what happened to the Giants, and they're cautious about overreacting to guys, and they're cautious about paying guys just because that's what the market demands. I think if you
But on the
look,
flip side, Jared Goff just got, he's making 52 million a year. And no, I like Jared Goff, but he shouldn't be making $52 million a year.
no, but he's got a better resume than any of the guys we've mentioned. And to be honest, I mean, I'm sure if you situate him amongst the other quarterbacks making that money, he probably has the best resume of those not named Aaron Rodgers, Patrick Mahomes, Josh
I
Allen,
think,
right? And even then, Josh Allen doesn't have the resume.
and I mean, Burrow's up there too. He hasn't played long enough, and he's been injured half the time.
Yes,
Um,
so let's see. So we got Joe Burrow, the most expensive quarterback in the league, average of $55 million. Then you got Jared Goff, Justin Herbert, Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts. I mean, amongst that list, take out MVP for Lamar Jackson. Uh, Jalen Hurts is the only one who has a resume even close to Jared Goff.
well, I mean, you could say Burrow does too,
And
except for
here,
the missed time. That's the big one for Burrow.
so I mean, you have to go. I mean, Patrick Mahomes, $45 million. Now, granted, signed his a little bit older than these guys, so he signed his contract before a lot of these guys, and we know how the market works. I just
And same
don't.
with Josh Allen.
Yes. I do not know how you slot in guys like Dak Prescott and Tua Tagovailoa into this list, because is Dak is Dak better than, let's just go down the list. Is Dak better than Joe Burrow? No. Is he better than Jared Goff? No. Is he better than Justin Herbert? Maybe,
I
but
I don't. I mean, the Jared Goff one, I think they would be comparable.
okay. I mean, is he better than Lamar Jackson? Is he better than Jalen
No,
Hurts? Like, I think he's better than Kyler Murray and Deshaun Watson and Kirk Cousins,
I'm
right?
hesitant on Hurts because I mean he was in such a good situation, and when things started to fall apart on that team, he didn't play particularly well,
So here's the thing. The market then demands that Dak Prescott should get about $51 million. We'll say
which is too
50,
much.
51 and a half, which puts him above Jalen Hurts but below Lamar Jackson, right? Like that that's too much for a guy who relies on having elite talent around him, because then you're not going to be able to afford to keep that elite talent around him, right? And I think you see that with some of these names on this list and why these teams struggle, right? Like there's a reason that, and obviously the 49ers are an outlier because of the contract that they have, right? But there's a reason why these names are not popping up, in the Super Bowl, because you're spending too much money at the quarterback position. And I just think, if you think about Tua Tagovailoa, realistically, I'm looking at this list. I think he probably can slot in probably right below Dak Prescott, who's currently, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
It's
12th
the
on the
Kirk
list.
Cousins effect, right? Where
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we move on from this guy. Oh, we'll just draft someone. I mean, I can take out Aaron Rodgers from the Jets because they traded for him. How many quarterbacks have they gone through? Um, the Panthers, we'll see what Bryce Young is, but I'm not hopeful. The Falcons, the Saints never draft one, but the Saints don't have a quarterback. So you run a huge risk of getting in this quarterback purgatory, and you just can't find one.
In today's
Because even if
NFL,
you take Jacksonville, where like, if for all purposes, this is Trevor Lawrence's third season because the first one with Urban Meyer was just a mess.
sure.
I mean, he's kind of in that same category as Jared Goff and Dak and Tua, where it's just kind of like, is he worth the money?
Not at 50
I
million.
mean,
And this is the thing.
right.
And
If
I,
he plays the same way that he's been playing, he's not worth it. So
but
you
I
even took a generational talent at number one, and it still doesn't work out.
but I still think that this is why the Cowboys and the Dolphins are calling these quarterbacks bluffs and saying, no, you got to go and earn it, because I am not going to pay Dak Prescott or Tua Tagovailoa 50 plus million dollars, because not one of them is in the conversation for top 5 quarterback in the postseason. Because I'll give you that Dak had a
Right.
wonderful, but even Dak though, right? Health has been an issue. He's 31 years old, right? Like I have a lot of question marks about what that next contract is going to look like with Dak Prescott. So I absolutely think that these teams have a right to be holding these quarterbacks' feet to the flames, as it were, to say, no, you have to go and earn this contract, because unlike Daniel Jones, we are not just going to pay you to pay you. And I think
Right. And
I think
you
that
know,
that change is coming.
I'm not a huge Dak fan,
Sure.
but I will say he's done a good job at becoming less of a mobile quarterback and more of a pocket quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
So I will give him that. If he had gotten to 2 NFC championship games, not even the Super Bowl, in his career, do you think we're having this conversation?
No, I think at that
They just
point
pay him.
they pay him, right? They look at Kirk Cousins, they say he's 36, he got 45 million. Dak is 5 years younger and 10 times better. We're going to go ahead and pay him 50, $52 million,
He's
right?
been to a couple NFC championship
Yeah.
games. We're just going to pay him.
So, you know, I don't. Here's the thing. Dak's play, I think we're both in agreement that Dak has a chance to earn the next contract. Tua almost certainly will not earn that contract. And if he gets it, it's because it's given to him, not
Oh,
because
I
he
think he'll
earned it.
get it, but he won't earn it. I think Dak has a shot to, especially this season where it's like, okay, the running game's not as good. Like, you've lost some pieces. If he still plays really well, there's a strong argument that you might as well just pay him. But I wouldn't pay Tua.
So I don't know how engaged our handful of listeners are in contract discussions, but I hope that they find it as entertaining and interesting as we do, because I know this is something we talk about regularly as we watch players get paid and guys move around the league chasing the bag, and what teams are willing to be buyers and which teams are willing to be sellers. So this stuff is interesting to us. As always, you can get in touch with the show at hecklerspod@gmail.com. If you do want to provide feedback, if you like these kinds of discussions, or if you don't want us to talk contract details for as long as we have, let us know. Reach out. So the next thing I want to talk about is a personal pet peeve of mine, which is schedule releases and schedule release videos. So I was thinking about this week. The schedule release video has become like one of the most annoying things of the year, in my opinion, because every single one gets hyped up, gets shared around, and it just becomes obnoxious. Like it's almost like how a Super Bowl ad is, put on social media the week before the Super Bowl. By the time you see it on the show, you've already reacted to it, and it's not nearly as enjoyable. So, the commercials aren't what they used to be. I feel like it's kind of the same way with schedule release, where once it became a popular idea, everyone just started to do it, and it just became so overplayed that like even the good ones are drowned out now by the bad ones, and the fact that everybody feels like they have to try to be a comedian. So
Wh-
it
I don't even
irritates me.
like the schedule release, let alone the videos. I just
Yes.
because by the time everything is like, oh, this is when everything's going to be released, everyone knows when everyone's playing. It all gets leaked, and I'm just drop it. Just if you got a notification from ESPN or whatever, you know, sports uh, thing that you use to get notifications, and it said the 2020 with this is 2020, yeah, 2024 2025 NFL season has been released. Could you imagine the excitement of trying to figure out what game you're going to go to, who's playing who at what times? Like, oh, this is a critical game at the end of the season. I get they're trying to dominate every month of the year, but I think this should be a surprise. And it's not dropped like they could drop it in May, but maybe sometimes it's at the end of the month, sometimes it's at the beginning. It's just a surprise. I think
Yeah.
that would work better.
Well, and I think too, like you get to a point where we're all. This is another pet peeve of mine. We're sending so many games out of the country, and the Panthers are one of those teams that's starting to play out of the country more, so you're losing the opportunity for a home game. It's frustrating because it's like you sit here and you're like, oh, they're going to play in Germany for a game that maybe I wanted to go to. So that, like, stuff like that irritates me. I wish that I get the Jaguars thing where they were going to play out of the country every year. I just wish that there
At
was a
this point,
better
yeah, that's their second home.
Yeah, I just wish that there was a better rotation of teams so that your favorite team is not necessarily losing a game that could be a home game every season. To me, that drives me crazy. Looking at the schedules, did you have any that stood out to you as particularly easy?
I mean, the Falcons have no excuse to not win the NFC South. They have, I'm going to pick it on them because they have the easiest schedule or strength of schedule, but there's no excuse. They need to win the division. They should get 11 wins. I mean, I, that team just frustrates. And I know they're a rival team, so I hope they do bad. But they get hyped up. I mean, this is like the third year they've been hyped up, and they're going to end up going like 9-8 again, or 8-9, or 7-10. I
So
just don't think that team is very good, and I'm tired of hearing about them. They have such an easy schedule. And what's going to happen is if they win 11 games, everyone's going to be like, "Oh, this Falcons team, it's so good, it's so good." But it's more a product of their schedule than the team itself.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I think obviously um, all four of the NFC South teams are in the bottom five for strength of schedule this year.
I mean, it
So
makes sense.
yes, so I do think that the Falcons may not have an easy time walking to winning the division, just given the fact that everyone's going to be playing an easy schedule. And I think all the teams are going to be maybe not the Panthers, no offense, but I think all the teams are going to be floating around that 500 number at the end of the season, and it's just going to be a kind of a matter of who won the most divisional games or whatever head to head or whatever the hell the tiebreaker is these days. I don't dare try to keep up with the mind of the NFL when it comes to tiebreaker rules. Obviously, the other outlier from the bottom of the list who's not in the NFC South would be the Bears. So at a four
Yeah, I was just
six
looking at that. That's kind of interesting.
yeah, 4-6-7 puts them third, well, tied for third in terms of easiest strength of schedule with the Panthers. So obviously, Caleb Williams is going to have a really good chance to play against some bad teams, or teams that, according to last year's record, were bad. So some of this will change too as teams kind of shuffle out and become who they're going to be for the 2024 season. But I do think Caleb Williams is going to have a chance to shine early. So if you have perhaps a future bet for Caleb Williams for MVP, playing against some bad teams, or not MVP, sorry, Rookie of the Year. MVP might be a stretch, but Rookie of the Year, not a bad bet based on the strength of schedule. Um, and then of course Chargers are down there, Seahawks, Dolphins. So of course you can definitely see Dolphins as a team who's going to make hay with an easy schedule and then disappoint. That's to
Well,
me,
that's
that's
what they
almost
do.
and honestly, we talked about it, right? If they play an easy schedule and Tua beats up on some bad teams and they end up paying him because they read into it and think that they're winners with Tua, that would be a massive mistake. So that's something to watch. I did not realize how easy their schedule was going to be.
Well, and what are their end of season games? So they have to go to New York for the last game of the season.
Yep.
Um, really, they don't have a lot of cold weather games. That's the only one.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is the
Oh
other
no, they
piece
have
of
to
it.
go to the Browns too.
We've talked about, yeah, so they go to the Browns, they play the 49ers in Miami, they go to Houston, which is a dome, and then they play in Miami. They do have a November game in Green Bay. So,
That could be
really,
it's a night game. It could be cold.
I mean, favorable schedule when you look at what their weakness has been. 2 years ago, if you were selling me on the Tua and the Dolphins can't play in the cold narrative, I would have said, there's not enough data. Now I would say that there almost certainly is. The second half slump for that team is real. When they have to play cold weather games, they simply can't do it. And I wouldn't be surprised if when all is said and done at the end of the season, this is a team whose record looks really favorable against losing teams and then looks like crap against winning teams. That just, to me, that is the Dolphins' hallmark right now.
No, I agree with that. And they have a lot of uh, they have some bad teams on their schedule, a few middling teams on here too that they should take advantage of. So, I mean, I think it'd be pretty safe to say that they're going to be a wild card team, but I agree that they're going to struggle against teams that are good.
Exactly. Well, with the schedule behind us, we move into the next part of everyone's favorite time of year, which is the rookie minicamp hype train. So this has kind of been going on as rookies reported. Now we're kind of moving into the next stage of the process. We've had a chance to hear the hype. Is there anybody that you think people might be overreacting to, or perhaps somebody who's getting dogged in the media?
So I'd say Caleb Williams. I actually saw a video this morning where, he didn't look good and he was constantly looking for checkdowns and all that. I mean, it's rookie mini camps. None of this really matters.
Yep.
Like, it's good for them to get reps in and all that, but it's way too early to know. I remember going back to Cam Newton when he was a rookie and, you know, going through training camp, going through preseason. He looked horrible. And then he lit it up his rookie year. This is too much to read into. There's always someone every year where they're like, this is the next great player, and they get cut by week 5.
Yep.
I mean, it's a crapshoot right now.
Yeah, still waiting on Keyshawn Butte to bust out for the Patriots and be a number one receiver. So,
Still waiting for
um,
Brenton Burson to be something.
well, I would not hold my breath on that one. So, I think from what I've seen, obviously, anybody who listens to me regularly, be it on our podcast or on the Fumble Monkey podcast that I sometimes appear on, knows I am not Desmond Ritter. I hate Desmond Ritter. I am a Spencer Rattler fanboy. And I will say that there's been some overreacting to his performance. I think it's an expectations game where this is somebody who fell to the fifth round. So people are like, oh my God, this guy doesn't look like a fifth round quarterback. He looks like a starter. Well, I could have told you that. In fact, I said it on the Fumble Monkey podcast that, this is a guy who, when you look at the crop of college quarterbacks, is by far head above the rest, the most ready to step in and run an NFL offense day one. What does that mean? Well, that means he's going to look the most comfortable under center. He's going to look the most comfortable running a huddle. He knows how to make adjustments at the line of scrimmage. He knows how to read defenses, right? It's a very mature player, right? So you would expect that he would look good in a rookie minicamp, which is all about things like running the huddle, things like lining up at the line of scrimmage properly, working through adjustments, hell, getting your helmet fitted, right? Like, that's what minicamp is about. It's not about flashing your arm talent. So I'm not surprised that Spencer Rattler is a name that has been popping up, and especially as Saints fans look for any reason to get excited about their future, because Dennis Allen and Derek Carr are not enough to get me out of bed in the morning.
I
The
hope it
other
stays bleak for him.
Well, for Spencer Rattler's sake, I would love for him to get a fair shake. But, who knows? He may just be Desmond Ritter. I was high on Desmond Ritter coming out of school. So, I got burned there. So who knows? But the other one that I would say too, in terms of getting dogged, um, getting dogged and somehow overhyped at the same time is, my quarterback, Drake May. Somebody who a few weeks ago, Gerard Mayo says, "Oh, he's got a lot to work on," and then wee right? Everyone sounds the alarm, starts screaming, "Oh, we took the wrong guy. He's a bum. He's already busting." And then here we are now, a couple weeks later. Oh, well, he's looking really great in camp, and he's commanding the locker room, and
It's the
he's
undersell over deliver.
yep, and it's so this time of year is always interesting because names pop up, guys will move. You'll see it if you do dynasty football. You'll see guys getting drafted higher than you'd expect because people are reacting to the news. Um, at the end of the day, this time of the year is about installing guys into the team, about getting them fitted for helmets, getting their locker all set up. It is not about seeing the finished product that's going to show up on the field. And if you buy
Well,
into hype,
what you see now is slightly more important than someone's pro day. It's
yes,
just not important.
yep. So our lesson of the day from the Hecklers podcast is do not overreact to rookie mini camps, to off-season hype, because it is a long journey to week one in the NFL. All right. Our closing topic for today, something that I wanted to discuss kind of coming back to the schedule release, looking to kind of we're going to get into the prediction business, which is a dangerous place to go, but something that I think would be fun and something that we can look back on midway through the season, towards the end of the season, and see how our predictions hold up. So my question for you, is there a Cinderella team this season? And who is the ugly stepsister? So that is, who will rise from the depths and who will fall on their ass? Billy, take it away.
So one team I think falls. I don't know if they fit in this category. Is the Bucks? They're not winning the division again. I think Baker's going to come back down to earth a little bit. Um, they're not going to come crashing down. I think the Browns are another one. That defense was fantastic last year. And I mentioned it earlier in the pod. Defense is unpredictable from year to year. If they come back down, Watson hasn't shown anything. I could see that being a situation where even if they finish with 9 wins and miss the playoffs, I think everyone gets fired.
Hmm.
Now a rising team. Uh boy, that's a tough one. Um,
It
I'm gonna
can
let
be.
you go for that one. I need a second to think about that.
Yeah, yeah. So let me start with my fall on their ass ugly stepsister. For me, we've talked about what I think the Dolphins will do, so I won't beat up on them further. A team that I'm going to say, not necessarily ugly stepsister, but a team that does take a significant step back is going to be the Texans. So they are
That's a good
playing
one.
they are playing a significantly harder schedule this year than what they played last year. Teams have an entire year of film on CJ Stroud to be able to game plan for what needs to be done to stop him. So for me, I absolutely think the Texans, they are tied for the fourth hardest schedule this year. So I know they added Stephon Diggs. He can be a bit of a locker room diva. Not a bit, he is. And I worry about that team's maturity, development. I think you could easily see a sophomore slump for CJ Stroud as teams learn to game plan for him better, and you may very well end up with a big step back for the Texans. And then I'll give you my Cinderella team. So, we talked about, obviously I like the Bears' strength of schedule, but if I'm looking here, there's two teams that really jump out to me. But I'll go ahead and pick the one that I think might surprise people a little bit and is probably a true Cinderella, and that would be the Seahawks. Um, they're sitting with a pretty easy schedule. 0.488 win percentage puts them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, tied for seventh, the easiest schedule in the season. They're a team with a lot of mature talent, right? They still have DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith, and Jigba, Kenneth Walker. Really fantastic running back. Geno Smith did not have a great year last year, but could potentially bounce back. And even if he didn't, Sam Howell was sort of laying in wait, and we know that he's a capable quarterback. So, and then of course, they bring in who was it? Mike McDaniel, um, the um, the defensive
That's
coordinator from is that
McDonald, right?
McDonald? Thank you, Mike McDonald, the defensive coordinator from the Ravens, right? So I expect their defense to take a step forward. So the Seahawks are absolutely a team that I could see, especially with the Rams. Aaron Donald's gone; they're significantly older. Who knows what they're going to be, right? The Seahawks are a team that could very well fight with the 49ers to win that division and should have a fair shake at a wild card spot and very easily could end up as our Cinderella team this season. And I'm pretty sure, let me just Google this real quick. As I look at the NFC West standings from last year, okay, they were the second worst team in that division. We know history tells us a team comes from last to first in their division every year. So, not going to be the Seahawks, but somewhere else in the league it's possible.
So I figured out my two sleeper teams that could rise up if everything breaks right. So
Let's hear it.
number one, I'm going to say the Titans. And so they have surrounded Will Levis with talent on offense. I know they did lose Derrick Henry, but maybe that's not a bad thing, right? Like maybe they can tailor their offense a little more towards Levis. So I think if things break, I'm not saying they're going to be a Super Bowl team, but division's not, it's not necessarily weak, but it's not strong either. So, I mean, I think there's a chance where they could rise through in that and be a wild card team, maybe even battle for the division, especially if the Texans take a step back. I think that would be the biggest thing. If they don't take a step back, then it's clearly their division. Um,
Finished four,
another
just for reference, finished 4 games behind Texans last year. That entire division separated by just a handful of games, and of course, Titans' easiest strength of schedule in their division, sitting at 21st in the league in terms of strength of schedule. But go ahead, your second team.
and another one which strength of schedule doesn't go their way. They're tied for sixth. Be the Giants. And so here's my rationale for that. They've improved the defense. They You could say they've improved the offense. I mean, Saquon is in and out of the lineup, so it's hard to know exactly what his value is to that team, and how much it's going to impact them this season. But you had Brian Burns. You got him relatively cheap compared to, most people thought Panthers would get a first for him. They got a second and a fifth, which still hurts. Um, their strength of schedule is 0.516. But you could look at the Cowboys. They've taken a step back. Maybe CeeDee Lamb and Dak aren't on the same page. Like they were fantastic last year. They take a step back. That team's could fall down the ranks. New defensive coordinator. How's that going to work out? And then you've got the Eagles, who are kind of in a transition of their own, where they're starting to get rid of some veterans. You lost Jason Kelsey, which is a huge leadership spot in that locker room. Same with Fletcher Cox. So how are these young guys going to step up if they don't step up? I mean, there could be a path for the Giants if everything breaks right.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting pick. I don't share the optimism, but it is important to note too. The Giants last year a net negative of 141 points, so a lot of ground that they have to cover to start winning some football games. They're not a team that was just losing football games by small margins. They were getting absolutely blown out, so they definitely need to recover. It looks like only Panthers at minus 180 and Commanders at minus 189 were the only two teams with a larger deficit. So a lot of ground to cover for the Giants. But, I think a lot of people are going to look at strength of schedule. They're going to look at, like I said, the historical trend that a team always comes from last in their division to first in their division. And they may look at the Chargers.
Oh, I was
who,
going
of
to say that's
course,
the team everyone's going to take. It's the
yep.
Chargers and the Colts, I think, would be the two teams everyone would take.
Yep. The Chargers sitting at the 27th easiest schedule. Well, 27th hardest schedule, which makes them what, the one, two, three, four, five, sixth easiest schedule in the league. So, I look at it and I say to myself, you know, the Chargers, new coach, obviously Herbert there, they do have a good chance, and the Raiders and Broncos probably take a step back as the Raiders don't really have a quarterback and the Broncos have a brand new one. So I think the Chargers could easily leapfrog and then compete with the Chiefs. I just don't think they're ready to play at the Chiefs level. And then, of course, I think the Bengals could also be another team. They only finished, I mean, they were 9-8. They weren't far off last year. That's another team. I know we talked about their struggles this offseason, but if they can get everything worked out before the season starts, they've got a decent schedule. They're not far off. That's a very competitive division where they could easily wind up as the number one team in that division. So
I mean,
lots of
they could wind
interest.
up as the number one team in the AFC.
Yes, absolutely. So lots of really interesting options here. I think, we touched on some really good teams, and some teams that could be a surprise, like Seattle, like the Giants. So with that, that is another episode of the Hecklers Podcast in the books. As always, you can find us anywhere that you get your podcasts. We ask that you don't forget to rate and subscribe to the show. That helps us reach more people. And if you want to get in contact with us, like I said earlier in the show, you can email us at hecklerspod@gmail.com. Send us questions, feedback, hate mail. You can even dunk on Billy's Panthers or my Patriots if you would like. So please reach out to us. It's the best way to get in touch with the show and give us something